possible for our kids. I remember a time a few years ago when we would have standards, when we would have public review, public comment, and we would have 3 people show up. So it's so great to see all of this renewed interest in the education of our children. With me tonight, I have David Smith. He's a STEM coordinator at the State Office of Education. And also Ricky Scott. Ricky, you've seen his name. He is the science specialist, and Ricky and I will both be doing a little bit of talking to you tonight, but mostly tonight is really about hearing from you. So I want to give you a little bit of background information, kind of tell you how the evening's going to play out, and then we'll get to the public comment part just as quickly as we possibly can. The meeting is scheduled to go from 7 until 8. You can see it's 6 o'clock right now, so we're starting exactly on time. And we really want to honor the fact that you have come tonight, and because many of you are parents of children, we want to honor that at 8 o'clock we do have the meeting, the official part of the meeting wrapped up so that you can get back home to your kids, which is really important to all of us. So I just wanted to lay that part out at the beginning. And then also to let you know that, as I said, our purpose tonight is really to hear from you. It's not to so much answer questions as it is to hear comments from you based on what you have learned as you've read through the standards, which either, hopefully, you had a chance to look at them on the web before you came tonight, but if not, they were available as you came in the door. And so you can respond to us about what you see. And I know I'm repeating myself, but we really, really want to hear from you. So at the conclusion of the meeting, at 8 o'clock, when the meeting's officially over, if you still have burning questions, there are 3 of us here that can answer those questions after the meeting. And also, at some point in time, Ricky will write his email address, because you can also email Ricky and he will answer any questions that you have directly, because we do want to make sure that you, if you have questions, that they're answered. But again, that's not really what this evening is about. This evening is about public comment, and we're not the public, we're the State Office of Education. But before we get started, we do want to give you some background on the science standards and what we're actually doing, why we're actually going over and changing things, so that you have some sort of context to think about the standards with. So at the State Office of Education, for every content area we have standards. And in order to understand what you're looking at, it's important to understand what standards are. Standards are statements of what students need to know and be able to do to be successful for their next level. And our standards, I am probably going to run over that thing. Our standards at the state are always with a mind towards high school graduation. So what do we want students to know and be able to do when they graduate from high school so that they can go to college or be successful in a career? That's always our end goal, and we think about what would that be along the way, and that's what you're looking at, is the standards that we think so far are appropriate for 6th through 8th graders in order to lead to that kind of understanding when they're ready for college. There is a myth out there that there's another set of standards somewhere, and there isn't. What you're looking at is the standards that the Board of Education is tasked with deciding whether or not those are the right standards for the school. So, for our children. So the standards that you're looking at have been developed over a process of about 3 years in conjunction with primarily Utah science educators, but with input from others along the way. It is the State Office of Education that does a lot of that work, but it is actually the Board of Education, the State Board of Education, who adopts the standards in the end and puts those in place. And so just to remind you, the State Board of Education is an elected body. We have a member of the State Board of Education here tonight. Thank you for coming. They will be the ones that will eventually decide whether or not we at the State Office of Education have responded appropriately to the public comment that we've received, incorporated that public comment into our documents, and then what standards are actually issued then to school children on the way out. So that's kind of the process that we go through. This particular standards review has also had a standards review committee that met in October, I think, for the first time, and has met twice. And we also have a member of the standards review committee here tonight, who I know is going to want to speak to you later, who's been very generous in spending his time to give an opinion of that process. They gave some direction. And again, this has just been an ongoing process. So what you're looking at tonight has a great big draft across the front of it, because these are not the standards that will be in schools. They are still the draft standards. There will be changes. We already know that, because tonight is the last of 5 public comments, and we have received some excellent feedback that's going to be very helpful to us as we revise these standards. So they are in draft form. Teachers are not using them, and they should, we hope. We don't want them using them until they are in their final form. So I'm going to turn a little bit of time over to Ricky to talk about what some of the changes are in the science standards that you'll see. And just before I do that, let me kind of chart out for you how this evening will play out. So we're going to only talk to you for about 5 more minutes, and then we're going to break the public comment into 2 pieces. In the first piece, what we want is just phrases to give everybody in the room, and we're not going to go down the rows, but a chance to tell us in just a phrase something that they either like or don't like about the standards. So if you have a concern, think about what is that concern and how can you capture that in a single phrase so that we can capture that on paper and go through that kind of rapidly so that everybody gets a chance. Then we'll spend our last half hour in a chance for more substantive kinds of comments. Well, we will ask people to come up to the podium and take turns with about a 3-minute opportunity for you to really kind of lay out more of what you're thinking, either in favor of the standards, why you like them, or about things in the standards that you would like to see changed. And we have found in previous sessions that that half hour is about right if we sort of take turns, somebody pro, somebody con, somebody pro, somebody con. So that's how we'll go, and then at 8 o'clock we're finished, but as I said, we'll dismiss, and then we'll go into private conversations, answer questions, that kind of thing. So I do want to turn the time, oh.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
I would like to know, though, in the audience, how many people are in favor of the standards and how many are against, so we can see if we're getting a proportional amount of time.
Okay, let's do that, but let's wait, because some people are here to get information and might not be ready for that vote just yet. So don't let me forget to do that, because I would like to know that as well. So, but I would like people to have a chance to maybe form some opinions based on what they hear tonight. So Ricky, will you give us a little background on the science standards?
So our science standards, as they are currently written and currently being used by science teachers, are quite old. They originated back in 1994 when some new research came out as far as how science should be taught. And with that research, some changes were made to our standards. Before then, our standards actually started back in '83. And in that time, the standards were pretty much just content, 100% content. Someone who was a part of that committee at the time told me that it was pretty much what they did is they looked at table of contents of textbooks they were using and said, yeah, that's a good amount of content. All kids should learn that. And in '94, we realized that there's much more to just content in science education, which includes the skills and processes that science teachers use. So in '94, a pretty major shift occurred that included, on top of content, skills that students should know how to do and perform to become a scientist, to be science literate, I guess we could say. Those standards in 1994 are pretty much what they are today. In 2002, 2004, there were some minor changes to some of the verbiage to try to make them a little more clear, a little easier for teachers to understand. But our standards as we have them now, depending on which one you're looking at, are anywhere between 10 to 20 years old. They're quite old. So with those standards, not only have we learned a lot of information as far as how, since that time, have we learned a lot of information as far as research about how science should be taught and how science is best taught, but also topics in science as well have changed. Like Diana said, we're preparing kids for college and career readiness. We're preparing kids that are in, say, 3rd grade right now for jobs that may not even exist right now. And we need to make sure that we give them what is best as far as technology and science content. So some of the biggest changes in these standards are really a change, hold on a second, are really a change in, I mean, the content itself is the same, but the standards are written in a way that integrate these science skills into the process. You'll notice them as you look at them, all of them start with some kind of a science process skill, make a model, interpret data, things like that. So these skills are completely integrated into the science standards themselves. It's one of the biggest changes to make sure, again, that science is for sure being taught in a way that is science-based, that will actually prepare kids to do science, not simply memorize and recall science. The other shift is an increase in engineering. In every single one of these, there are 4 specific standards specific to the engineering process that get it specifically at skills as far as solving problems and being able to really integrate both the science and the engineering practices together. So those really are the biggest changes between them. Now again, like Diana said, they are in draft, and that's the purpose where it is right now. During these 5 meetings that we've had, but again, beyond that, during the 90-day review period that is still going to happen until July, you are able, and everyone who you know is invited to go find the standards, go online, and provide us feedback online. What is going to happen as soon as that ends, July 10th or so, I think is the end of the 90-day review period, our writing teams will get back together. They will then respond to this feedback that we've received. They'll be able to put together, okay, here's what people are saying. They don't like this, they do like this. They think this should be moved here, they think that should move there. And they'll be able to say, here's what we have, here's the feedback we've received, and here's the changes that we've made. And then that'll be presented to the board with some suggestions. Here's our standards, here's where the writing teams think we should go, and they'll let us know. Go in that direction, don't go in that direction. And they'll give us direction on where to go. At that time, we'll go back to the writing teams again, and the writing teams will make the changes suggested by the board. And then a final document will be made and presented to the board as far as, here are the final science standards. They will look at them and say yes or no, or possible changes. So that's our current process for science standards. Did I answer your question? Or?
Well, I'm unclear. You said it's changing how you teach children. Is it like you change the Socratic method? Are you, I mean, what does that mean to someone who's not an educator?
So,
are you changing behavioral objectives?
Really what it is that if you think of how science was taught to me, and maybe science to most people in this room, science for a long time has been taught as a history class, where your job is to memorize and recall fact. There have been sometimes, hold on, calm down. There have been sometimes, okay, listen, calm down. Okay, goodness, I'm going to move on this side doesn't like me too much. What I'm trying to say is in some places it's taught like that, right? Now again, in our current science standards, it's specifically integrated. These are skills that students should know. And that is the way that's the best way science should be taught, in a hands-on way. Our current standards offer, as 50% of the standards, here are the skills that students should be able to do, but because they're not integrated directly in the standards, sometimes they're overlooked and not all of them are actually covered. And so because of that, now with them being completely integrated, now we make sure that we can ensure that students are doing science in order to understand science content.
I really wasn't being...
No, it was looks on your face that scared me. I'm sorry.
No, because I'm not in education, so I really did not understand what you meant. So please don't tell me to calm down, because I didn't know. I just wanted to
I apologize.
clarify.
Okay,
I don't know, are we...
you said from the research, it's the best way that science should be taught, but I've read the research, and the research presents some individual classroom scenarios with no evidence whether this improves student learning or not. It's just an individual classroom scenario. There's no controlled studies or anything to prove that this is the best way. This is a group of people deciding, a very small group of people
Okay, well,
deciding.
I think we're kind of getting
this is the best
beyond where we
way.
want to be. Let's
No,
first get some
no,
content.
she's clarifying statement.
She's right
It's
on
a
topic.
clarifying statement because you said it's the best way that science should be taught. And there's no evidence of that, so I don't think that's a fair statement for you to make to a group of people.
So
When there's
one
no
thing that I
evidence
think
that
is important
One way.
to keep in mind is when Ricky talks about that this is more about the science and how to teach, The State Office of Education doesn't tell teachers how to teach.
You are in this.
So what Ricky is trying to say, and I hope that I'm getting this right, Ricky, that we're interested in students doing more than just memorizing facts about science, but actually having a deeper understanding that happens through actually doing science. So more emphasis on lab work or research or those kinds of things. But in terms of prescribing for teachers exactly how to teach, that is not what we do. And to the extent, and we've actually had some of this feedback already, to the extent that you're seeing that in the standards, that's the kind of thing that we will be changing. Because we do not prescribe for teachers how to conduct their classrooms, that's local control. Now, I said that we would talk for 10 minutes, and I want to kind of get us back into the structure that we promised you tonight so that everybody gets a chance to talk. So remember that for this first 20 minutes, it is about making very short statements. It's not about long statements. It's just a sentence, maybe two, so that David and Adrian can capture over here what your concerns are and what your thoughts are. What we've noticed is that these are falling into two areas. Philosophical concerns that might be in areas about the documents that were used to help prepare the science standards, or concerns about where the standards came from, that's kind of philosophical, or actual standards concerns like specific content pieces that are in the standards that you might have concerns about or that you might be supportive of. So what I'm going to ask you to do, number one, speak loudly, because this is a very large auditorium, although I've been in larger, and then tell us first where, if you're addressing a philosophical concern or a concern about the standards, and then remember 1 or 2 sentences, because we only have an hour and there's a lot of people, and I promise you that no later than 7:35 we'll stop and we'll start giving you the podium to speak more. Also remember, it's not a time for us to answer questions, it's a time for you to state your concerns. So with that, I will call on this lady right here.
Okay, so I have a question. Sorry. I don't know what
Dang it, I said no questions. No, it's fine.
Ask.
Your office is suggesting you pass the mic so it can be recorded.
Okay, so I just wanted to ask Ricky, because he said you're taking public input right now until July, and then things will be revised, and then the board will adopt it or not adopt it. So will that revision be presented to the public, or after July, is that it? How does that work?
Historically, the board has, at that time, then just made that decision. So that's really up to the board. So I guess my answer to that is stay tuned. And it will be very public when the board is considering that, and then it'll just be an outcome of that.
Will we have an option to see what those revisions are?
The board will be the first to see those revisions. So, and if the board wishes to adopt them at that point,
So the answer
Then-
is
So
no.
the
we
answer
will
is
not
no
have
after
to.
the answer is in the past that has not been the case. Okay? So now let's get back on track. Which kind of concern, and quite frankly, if there's too many people here to run around, and our office is connected to this microphone, so I will repeat also in part to make sure that we're capturing what you say correctly. So, yes
So
ma'am.
my main concern, my
Loudly.
board, is they are national standards.
Okay, so I believe that's a philosophical concern that they are national standards. Thank you.
That have been cut and pasted.
That have been cut and pasted. National standards that have been cut and pasted. Yes.
I'm highly supportive of the standard. I think where we're headed with this, because it is based on really good research and how kids
read
learn. I have, and I actually work in informal science education, working with students and families that aren't required to go to class, and
Okay, is this
how
what
they
you
learn. This is how they learn. So I'm highly supportive.
Okay. So philosophical, highly supportive, based on research. Let's move to the side of the room. Yes, sir.
One of the things I appreciate about the standards is that they focus on the process of science, which is very general, which can apply to many sciences and cuts across all the sciences.
Okay, so support for the processes, and I believe David's getting that here on standards. Yes, sir.
I like that it's inquiry-based and respectful of the way science works. Like this gentleman says, it's a process, and intellectual honesty in terms of objective information.
Okay,
I'm-
so
I
I've heard
like- I like-
inquiry-based and objective information. Yes, ma'am?
I'm highly in support of this.
For the entire next generation science standards, and we have only considered a sliver of it.
Okay. You probably can't see that far, but we do, I should have said also that our office, you'll notice that there are cameras around. Our office is recording this as well as other people that I don't know who they are, but that's great because I've never felt more like a movie star than I feel tonight. So that's fine. So, but we have one of the recordings so we can go back and capture this. Yes, ma'am?
From page 25 of the framework, a limited set of core ideas allows for deep exploration of important concepts equals impossible. You can't have less ideas and less knowledge and have deep exploration of concepts. It is impossible for the brain to do that.
So that sounds like
Knowledge is not
standards.
built that way. So
Standards concern that it's in
So limited
conflict.
core ideas does not allow for deep exploration. It's impossible.
Okay, thank you. Let's go all the way to the back, the lady in yellow.
As a teacher, I strongly disagree with that. I feel like limiting what you have to teach in a year allows you to explore it limits.
Okay, so we've heard both sides, the limits are both impossible and good. Yes, sir?
I'm very concerned that philosophically, much of scientific theory is presented as though fact. And there needs to be a more clear distinction so that children can learn both sides of the story.
Okay, so a distinction between fact and theory, yes.
I like the more involvement of mathematics in the scientific standards.
Okay, but there's more math in the science standards. Okay, yes, sir?
You talked about a new way of teaching it, and yet I'm looking at this section on life, molecules, organisms, and biological evolution. This is predetermined, it's spitting back facts, and I don't see anything in here about exploring new science that challenges these theories.
So you want to see more about exploring new science that challenges theories? Do I have that right?
Mainstream science.
That challenges mainstream science theories. All the way in the back.
Okay, my concern is that you say in there Utah written, and yet they are word for word, the next generation science standards word for word. And my other concern is that the public review survey does not really give us an opportunity to really make comments. There's only 2 options, and then it's limited on how many characters you can type. And my third concern is that the new standards are very environmentally heavy.
Okay, so
And that's a concern for me, as well as I feel like after reading all the performance tasks that are written on there, that they're, at least for 6th grade level, that the tasks that they're asking students to do are way above grade level.
okay, so I heard a lot more than one concern, but I know I heard the concern about NGSS, and I know I heard a concern about on grade level, and environmentally heavy. So I hope we got that all. And let me just say also that if you don't feel like your voice is heard tonight, or if you don't think you have enough characters, again, Ricky will put his email address on, and there is no character limit that I've ever noticed in email. So, and we consider all of that public comment. Yes, ma'am, I know you've had your hand up for a while.
He said that it included math. It includes math, but nowhere does it include the math equations that our students are to learn. It just makes reference to math. So how is the teacher to know what math to use to teach this part of the science?
So you want
It's a
more
guessing game.
explicitness on the math?
Absolutely.
Okay, and the gentleman sitting right in front of you?
Yes, as a professional scientist, I've reviewed some of these things, and I'm seriously concerned about some really bad science that's in the standards that are being considered. And a lot of the current research, some of the best research is left out, and in fact actually excluded by the methodology that's given here, where a conclusion is given, and then the students are to go out and find evidence to support the conclusion. And as a scientist, I'm very concerned about that methodology.
Okay, so bad science and concerns about methodology.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, wait a minute. You already got to go once. So
I'll keep it up until we
keep
have.
it up, I'll come back to you. So I want to make sure that people get to speak before I start back around the room again. Yes.
I'm also have a scientific background, and I'm very supportive. it's not a concern I have, but I appreciate what's already been said, that the process of learning science is a big part of the curriculum. And the fact that it was developed by scientists from across the nation show that there's a broad range of scientists and scientific perspectives and scientific expertise that will prepare Utah students for an increasingly global, competitive global workforce.
Okay, so I heard appreciation for the methodology and also an appreciation for the process being at a larger level than the outside of Utah perspective. Yes, sir.
I'm highly in favor of the fact that we are introducing engineering into these standards, creating a much stronger STEM-based standards, which is something that Utah as a whole really needs so that we can, economically survive over the next 20, 30 years. We need students who are very versed in STEM. I think this is one of the first steps in really supporting that, which full circles back around to supporting us in public education again, if we can boom that economy.
So support for engineering and for sort of an economic lens there. Have I called on you yet? Okay.
The science and engineering practices are support valuable skills that kids can use across the curriculum. So not just in science, but social studies, math, language arts. So I'm very supportive of that piece.
Okay, so science skills that cross the curriculum. Yes, ma'am.
I understand he was on the parent committee, so I want to give my comments up to him. He said it.
Oh, okay, that's never happened before. Wow.
The entire K through 12 system, as I have been able to investigate it, lacks the concept of falsification, which is a fundamental principle in philosophy of science.
Okay, so lacks, say that one more time. So
It lacks the concept of falsification in the scientific process.
okay, lacks the qualification. I don't know why I can't say that, but let's make sure we've got it over here. We've got it recorded twice, I think. Yeah.
What you have here are theories. These are not absolutes. Science is not absolute. It never has been. It changes all the time. And you're teaching this as absolutes. Allow the students to know that these are theories and there are other ways to think.
Okay, so concerned that the science standards are really theories, not absolutes.
Because right now we're teaching kids to regurgitate information back rather than think. I see this every time I try to hire somebody.
Okay, so wanting more emphasis on thinking than just regurgitation. So, yes, ma'am.
What I love about these standards is that they promote thinking.
Okay, so you see the promotion of thinking in them, and I already called on you, right?
I'll wait.
Okay, so if I've already called on you, put your hand down just for a minute. Yes, ma'am.
I'm also an informal science educator, and this is a supportive, I'd say in the philosophical context, again, that it does promote thinking and that it promotes, students' practice of science, understanding that science is a way of understanding that uses evidence, and students are encouraged to gather that evidence and evaluate that evidence.
Okay, so I have, some of that I've heard before, but I hadn't heard anybody say about the evidence piece. So let's make sure that we capture that. Yes, sir.
I'm a science educator of 23 years experience, and I'm concerned about the scaffolding. Okay, with all that teaching experience, how one concept builds on another. And to give you a specific example, the 7th grade core introduces Newton's laws. And so I thought, okay, well, to understand Newton's laws, you have to understand mass. So I thought, oh, well, for sure, the concept of mass is taught in the 6th grade standard. And I looked back there, and it wasn't there. And you have to take these kids and build one idea on the other. And I'm not concerned as much with the content of the core, but how it builds on itself.
So you want to see clear progressions in the scaffolding that leads to understanding. Yes, ma'am.
I would like to see write our own cores rather than copying from the national core and then telling the people that it's Utah. When we can go on a computer and see word for word, it's the same as the national. And people, I went through this with the math a few years ago. My grandkids, everybody I know, I talked to accountants and businessmen and all kinds of people who should be able to do math homework with their
the standards be written entirely at a local level.
We have a good set, let's just keep moving forward with the set we have.
Okay, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I am in support of the standards because I feel that as an educator, I just see all the opportunities for authentic integration between language arts and the sciences, mathematics and the sciences, and kids will have the opportunities to apply their thinking and understanding in those other curricular areas into science and vice versa.
Okay, so authentic integration and application of thinking. Yes, ma'am.
I'm opposed to the standards. I'm also a teacher, and I'm opposed to them for both reasons, philosophical and standards-based. They leave out a lot of very important things that Vincent has pointed out. They almost completely get rid of electricity, human anatomy, computer science, in order to make room for an unprecedented amount of global warming, climate change. Basically, aligning with the United Nations Agenda 21, if anyone's been studying that lately. I'm completely opposed to nationalization on a philosophical level because I'm a fan of freedom. I'm a fan of local control, and I think that we can have total confidence in our ability to find the best curriculum and the best standards using the brilliance that we have here and outside our state. We don't need to carbon copy or rubber stamp whatever the UN or the NGSS has come up with.
So I heard both the standards concern and a philosophical concern. Did we get them both? Ricky, I know you're watching.
Science, human anatomy are being left out in order to make room for political bias, basically.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
I am very supportive of the integrated model of having the sciences outside of silos so they can see connections between the earth, the life, the physical, and engineering, as well as the other content areas. I think that's really great for students to see how all the sciences connect together.
So the connections between the various branches of science. Okay, I think you had your hand up.
Okay, so, now I can't, you have your thought and then the next thing when you have a chance. So I am really concerned as an educator with adopting the states, the national standards because it puts us at the mercy of the national publishers, which are ramming environmental agenda and their bias down our throats. And the reason I know that is because, yes, we integrate it in language arts, but I've read grades 1 through 6 of the textbook that our district adopted, and it's extremely environmental agenda in 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. It has huge passages on that. It's a very biased, and I've taken this to the district, and they have basically, they just whitewashed it. And so they won't even allow I won't say allow, they're not informing the teachers that this is very biased from grades 1 through 6, so that they can give a neutral and both sides of the story.
So concern about being connected to something at a more national kind of lens that then puts us at the mercy of publishers and the biases that they might include.
Not mine. They do.
Okay.
Right now.
Okay, yes, ma'am.
So from my research, the NGSS standards are a lower quality. They were given a C grade overall in regards to science standards. And I think it's terrible for us to adopt lower standards. Aren't we seeking for excellence? So why aren't we looking for standards that are A grade standards? Why are we just accepting a national version that's mass produced and is a lower quality? So I'm concerned about the quality of science.
So the quality of science, okay, yes.
I believe that grade was given via the Fordham Institute, am I correct?
Yeah.
Right.
And if you're going to take that and speak about that in ways that are definitive, we can argue the merits of that particular institution. But they have given the Common Core Math standards an A- and the language arts standards a solid, robust B, and encourage those standards, and they are in fact Common Core standards, to be out there and to be used. So be careful about what you pick and choose. If you're going to take pieces, you have to take it all. And if you're against the Common Core and that whole idea, don't cite the Fordham Institute as supporting your stance, because it's...
But if the state supports
So,
Fordham
okay.
Institute's initiatives, then why not go with Fordham Institute? The state obviously loves the Fordham Institute.
Well, I would categorically agree with you, and definitely.
So remember, we're not here for debate, but I'm starting to sense that people have much more to say. So, and it's also the time I promised. So, I also promised that we would do a show of hands, and I intentionally didn't do that before I started calling on people because I don't know, but maybe 5 people in the room, and I didn't want myself to be biased in that way. So now we can do the show of hands, because from here on out, we'll have a more, we'll have a way to know who's pro and con. How many people are right now in support of the standards? We can do 3, yes, we can do that too. Okay, how many, so these are people who solidly support the standards, the new standards. How many people would solidly not support the new standards? And how many people are either in the middle or still trying to decide? Okay,
I'm just
so
trying to ask the question for people like me that have come to the meeting and said, just tell me, you had the parent review of 6 through 8. So does that mean if you adopt 6 through 8, then you adopt K through 12?
no.
Okay, so if you don't adopt K through 12, but we're looking at 6 through 8, why didn't the state just start with K1 and 2 to start with, implement it, move those students along? So that's just a
Okay, so I will answer that question. The reason that we started with 6 through 8 is because middle school was seen to be at the most at-risk place. And if we started with K and with 2, it's 12 years before we're actually getting kids to be college and career ready. But if we start with grade 9, 10, 11, 12, they haven't had nearly the background. And we recognize that by starting in the middle, we haven't brought them through the kind of background that would prepare them. But now they can have some more to go further. It does not mean that the K-5 standards that you see in NGSS are what will be adopted or even considered. The only focus was on 6A. So what I'd like to do, we really want to hear from you, and I promise I'll stay as long as you want afterwards. What has worked well in other places, and I'm gonna shoot you guys away, is because we are pretty much split in here. So if you would like to speak for up to about 3 minutes, and Ricky, do you have your phone? So you're the official timer. If you would like to speak in favor of the standards, actually, I think the room was sort of split this way, so let's do it this way. If you'd like to speak in opposition to the standards, please come up here and we'll just start pulling people off the front row. If you'd like to speak in favor of the standards, please come up here. That way it goes more quickly, and you have, again, up to 3 minutes, and we'll just go back and forth until it is 8 o'clock. So I'm going to plug this in here. Maybe.
Can I also say, I'm going to give a kind of a, my hand is kind of like a 30-second warning.
Because we're not evenly split, but let's just start with this gentleman right here, and you get to be first. Is that all right with you?
Collect my thoughts.
Oh, I can start over here. Okay, are you ready? Okay.
My difference is philosophical, and there are people that say that the standards should be taken locally, but those who think science standards should be determined locally have a religious bias. Scientific truths are universal truths. They're not cultural truths. And so somebody who thinks that religion can develop science only has to look at the truths that religion has given us, like a flat earth and a solar system where the sun revolves around the earth. Scientific truths give us the ability to travel in space, develop computers, and generally advance our society. If we ignore the next generation science standards, we doom ourselves and our children to ignorance and stagnation.
Thank you.
Okay, I am an educator. I've taught 6th grade science for 20 years. I am against the new standards. These are the reasons why. First of all, I disagree that the old standards are not doing science-based. I disagree that for 20 years we've taught facts only. I look at my 6th grade classroom and my students are always doing science. We have labs 3 or 4 times a week. We've been gathering pond water, looking at microbes under a microscope, learning the scientific method, and all of those things are in the current standards. My question is, why can we not take what we have, which is already, in my opinion, a good scope and sequence for learning science, and add the engineering things that you want added in, or add some of the performance-based activities that you think are lacking, to the current content that we already have. I see sixth graders who are excited about science because they're learning things that are exciting to them. Microbes, heat, light, and sound, and space and astronomy. You're going to take that all away from sixth graders and you're going to give them global warming and human impact on the environment. I do not know how we are going to make doing science fun in sixth grade with those standards. I do not know how we are going to make labs that sixth graders are going to be excited about with the new standards. My other concern is maybe something you haven't thought about. But as a sixth grade teacher, we do not get a science budget like secondary teachers do. We are not given money to buy lab supplies for science. I personally only teach science, but I know sixth grade teachers who are in an elementary setting that teach a lot of subjects. They don't have a lot of money to be putting out for science. I know that over the course of a 20-year career, I've spent thousands of my own money for lab supplies that will be useless when these standards change. There's not going to be a budget to buy new supplies. The burden you are putting on every sixth grade teacher in the state of Utah is unimaginable to me. And I've heard the state office say themselves that we are hoping teachers will trade. Well, I know a teacher who spent $1,000 on a rock collection for 8th grade. I don't think that 8th grade teacher is going to want to give that rock collection that they spent years collecting and spending their own money on to some other teacher who now has rocks. It doesn't make sense to me. And I know this is going to happen across the board. You're already putting a financial burden on teachers who spend much out of their own pocket for their own supplies. My last concern is, I was part of the state office committee that wrote this book. We did this last year. I spent a year of my time working on this book. For the first time, sixth grade teachers have had our entire curriculum, our entire core standards in one book. We have used this book to death this year. It's been so useful. I found out the day this was published that the standards were going to change. I also found out the state office knew they were going to change when we were doing this project. Yeah, that frustrates me. It frustrates me that they told me that Utah teachers sat in a meeting and wrote these standards. They did not. These standards are word for word the national standards.
Yes, I should have mentioned this early, but part of our protocol has been not to applaud because people are coming up here and they are saying what they believe out of their heart, and we want this to be a safe environment for everybody, no matter what they think. So please be as respectful to these speakers as you were when we were doing the round robin.
Thank you. I'm Seth Jarvis. I'm the director of the Clark Planetarium. Every year we have about 100,000 Utah school kids come see our programs for free. We're intimately involved in the education through science with teachers. My admiration for anyone who teaches science is boundless, and the work that you do is nothing short of miraculous. I can't get into the nuts and bolts. I respect your concerns. I think that they're very sensible. And we are ourselves a little nervous about if astronomy goes from another grade. Elementary schools go on field trips, junior highs don't. And so there's that element of it that makes us a little nervous. That said, I'm looking at these core curriculum revisions in terms of what's going to provide the greatest opportunity for a scientifically literate population, where we encourage people to think about the science in their everyday lives and appreciate the science news stories from a perspective of what's the intellectual honesty, what's the process, what's the difference between a theory in the term that we use it and a theory in terms of the way scientists use it, because there is a huge difference. A theory scientifically is the best evidenced model for explaining what happens. That's itself a science education. Reading those curriculum guidelines, as I've done a few times in preparation for this meeting, they make sense. They do a good job of helping people learn to teach students to think like scientists, the honest process of appraisal, evaluation, hypothesis, testing, interpretation of data. The core of science is, in fact, falsification, and the idea of how might my hypothesis be wrong? That's fundamental to the core. So as a person who deals literally with 100,000 school kids a year, who is compelled only by the improvement of public science literacy, I think that these improvements for these grades are a good step in the right direction. Thank you.
My name is Sean Evanson, and as I mentioned earlier, 23 years of science teaching experience. And I have a colleague, you know her, Sarah. And Sarah was raised in Canada. And if you know anything about Canada, Canada's about number 4 in the world in education. And so I asked Sarah, I said, how is your experience growing up in Eastern Canada? How is that different than what you're experiencing here in the United States? And what she told me was that through the 8th grade, all they learn is basic concepts. And she told me that, she said, I was so well grounded in the basics by the end of 8th grade that when they introduced the higher order material in high school, it was not a problem. And what this core does is it ignores the developmental process. I have taught 7th graders for 2 decades. And what this core does is forces the higher order before many of these children have the brain development to deal with those higher order concepts. Some of them do, some of them don't. I was one of those kids. The abstraction part didn't even start to develop until I was at the end of 10th grade, beginning of 11th grade. And she went on to tell me, this colleague of mine, she said, I noticed that when I got down to BYU, American kids were struggling. And she told me, she said, BYU was a breeze for me because I got the fundamentals between kindergarten and 8th grade. And this is what I'm talking about, folks, with the scaffolding part of this. Okay? Physics in 7th grade. All right? The 8th graders, I've been talking to our 8th grade teachers this week, and they've told me how hard it is for these kids at the end of 8th grade to begin to grasp the physics. And we're moving that down into 7th grade. I am not opposed to what is being put into this core, but how it is structured and when it is taught. And we need to look at brain development, folks, and we need to get the right material in the right place. And I can tell you, I can't teach Newton's laws until the kids understand mass. Okay? You have to teach mass first before you can teach mass times acceleration equals force. And it is not put in that sequential order where we can build. And that's what we really need to look at here, more than just the content of the core. We need to put it on the right level for the kids.
I'd also like to thank all of our teachers. I've taught as well, not quite 22 years I've been in education. And I've been on both sides of it. I've been a student, a lifelong student. I'm in a PhD program now at the University of Utah, much because I miss the classroom in the inquiry sense of science. And I also teach at UVU, and what I said earlier, you're right, a lot of the teachers have done an excellent job. The thing that I was trying to say was that I've seen a struggle, though, in the desire to get a degree, to do the work, and to turn it in, but not to understand it. And I think that a process-based standard where you have a hands-on curriculum and you are able to look at data and analyze it. Many students have never been given that opportunity. They just want to know, will this be on the test? What do I need to memorize? How can I get an A in your class? When I put in front of them a set of data or a graph or a chart and I ask them to analyze it, that's where they struggle. They really struggle in making some conclusion out of what's presented before them. I am in support of a process-based education system, and I think that
maybe dilute it down quite a bit for the grade level and for the amount of understanding that they have, and then scaffolding it at a higher level. I could show off a little bit and say that my daughter was at the science fair this year, and I said, what are you going to do next year? And she said, I'm going to take my project further. And I was really proud of her for saying that, because she wants to get more analysis. She wants to get more data. She wants to see what the next level will be. One of my concerns also is the illiteracy between, or the gap, I should say, it's not such a strong word, but the gap between the way that scientists talk and the words that we use and the way that the public uses the same words, especially the word theory. Many people think that some of the current data that is out there and is being spoken about on a global platform is a theory. It is a theory. A theory in science means that it's been tested. It's been tested over and over again, replicated, due to the standards that we know of science through time. At the best of our technology, at the best of our minds. And it's not just a local thing, it is a global thing. And I think for our students to be able to understand that that's what a scientific theory means is really essential. Because many of us, including myself, if I'm not an expert in something, I choose not to speak up on it. Because I'm afraid of being wrong. And so if we have that gap in what things mean, then people say, oh, well, that's just a theory. I don't think that's true. I heard it was a theory. It is a theory. It's been tested. It's been proven. There's hundreds and thousands of the top world scientists working on things. And that's the current science that our students should analyze, not regurgitate. But they should look at the data and analyze it. Thank you.
I want to get a sense of how many people still want to speak. Some people, so there's definitely not enough time for everybody who wants to speak, but let's cut it down to 2 minutes each.
It also might be good to clear, I mean, if you just.
Yeah, if you've already spoken and you're finished, feel free to move back to your other seat. And then I'm going to ask Ricky to cut it down to 2 minutes each. And with apologies, because not everybody will get a chance to speak before 8 o'clock. If your concern or your support is something that's already been said, then let's maybe think about getting some new voices in. So.
I have a question. Why can't we stay longer? If we all have time to listen, because I'm curious.
We will stay longer, but the meeting ends at 8, and that's to honor people who do have other obligations.
Okay, so
but we will stay. They can leave, yes, but we'll stay.
Past that.
Okay, my name is Frank Strickland. I'm a senior research geologist. I work in national labs, published peer-reviewed journals, and presented at national symposium. So don't say that to brag. I just want to let you know I'm a scientist, and I'm not just speaking out of theory. First of all, I want to... I want to, first of all, put to rest the idea that's been presented in other meetings that this is a locally written science standard. I have here a side-by-side comparison of the next generation science standards, national standards, with the Utah standards. And they are identical, down to the punctuation. And this isn't hard to find. Just take the national science standards on your computer, cut the verbiage, not the number, but the verbiage, post it on Google, and voila, up will come the national science standards, word for word. But the beauty of that process is that you get the rest of the story. What we've got in our national science standards is only the top sentence here. The rest of it will be implemented also, because as has been mentioned by many of the teachers, you cannot teach off of that one sentence. You've got to have processes, activities, lesson plans, and so on. And here's the rest of the story. And each one has a sheet like this if you want to see what is actually being voted on and discussed today. Okay, I want to say that there's some very bad science in this. Section 7.2.2 brings over some very bad science from the 1800s, Ernest Haeckel's charts and diagrams. Again, Google that. The entire first page is devoted to the fact that these are blatantly false and hoaxes. And yet we are bringing it up into current science. We're leaving out good science. We're leaving out genetic entropy. We're leaving out microbiology. We're leaving out a lot of things that should be in there in order to make room for some of these politically driven things. Okay, it's better that we do nothing, go back to the drawing board, take our current science standards, which have been proven to be better, and work them over. Let's not cut and paste a national science standard. And I don't believe in the demagogue theory. The national people at the upper levels, they are not demagogues. To give all the power for a small group of people to write the science standards for the entire nation is not healthy. And we see it here because their biases are showing up all over this science.
I'll be brief. I've been a middle school teacher and a college professor for 45 years. During that time, I've seen more times than I like to remember arguments about standards. Every school I've ever been to has gone through the standards, and we should do that. You cannot keep the same science standards, particularly, for 20, 30, 40 years. You've got to change. And I would just say that if we're trying to decide what the standards should look like, we've got to go by the best data, the best evidence. And we cannot look just to Utah. We've got to look everywhere. The standards we have in front of us are good. They're inquiry-based. They are, in fact, based on accepted scientific principles. And I would suggest that we go with them. No one's ever going to... the other thing I've learned, by the way, in the last 45 years, whatever sets of standards we adopt, not everyone's going to be happy with them. And that's going to be true.
I know we've been told lots of things by the USOE and the NGSS, and I want to distinguish that there's a difference between what we've been told and what's true. So we've been told these develop critical thinking, there's no truth to that. We've been told these are good and developed by experts, and there's no truth to that. We've been told this is the best way to teach science, and there's no truth to that. In fact, no one's asked the most important question, which is, does this improve student learning? No one's asked that. The research hasn't been done on the next generation science standards to show it improves student learning. So I find it interesting that the National Research Council hasn't researched its own product. And you research it by taking it into controlled studies, which is what the American Institute of Research has told us. That has not been done. There's no evidence behind these, so we cannot make the statement that there is evidence because that is not true. Our state shouldn't be accepting anything that doesn't have evidence. There is evidence that when you strip away content, like has been done with these standards, strip away and limit content, student learning goes down. That's logical, that makes sense, but in the research, that is the truth. There's also evidence that the project method in the 20s and discovery learning that happened in 1993, which all had the same buzzwords, student engaged, more deep thinking on less concepts. Students will record data, find information, analyze data. The same thing that these people are fascinated with right now, their ideas in research did not pan out and did not improve student learning. That's the truth. The research determines the truth. Not all these statements by people who are supposed to be scientists but aren't doing their due diligence and showing evidence that their work is good. If you want students to learn to analyze data, have them analyze data. If you want students to learn to read graphs, give them all the knowledge they need to and teach them to read a graph. Knowledge is power, and knowledge enables a student to build more knowledge. That is how the brain works. You can't limit content and think deeper. So these standards, in effect, will have our students learning less science than students in Japan, students in Germany, students in Wyoming, our cousins in Arizona. These will have our students learning less science. If we want them to do science, give them the rich, deep content and give them the science. But don't strip it away and call it good, because the evidence says it is not good. So we have to follow the evidence when discussing science.
So I think we'll take one more from each side, because I believe I started on this side. We'll do one more from each side, which will put us a little bit beyond 8, but let's do that, and then we'll wrap up and continue.
I think a couple of the other speakers took a little bit more than their time, so could we have a little bit of more time on this side?
Ricky, I've been watching Ricky, he's timing. He's timing. Some people choose to speak for a less amount of time.
I'll go. My name is Blake Woodall. I'm the Vice President of Design Program at Thanksgiving Point. As an informal educator, I've worked in my past with teachers, doing teacher professional development. I've also worked with students and kids. And the one thing that I know and what I've seen with students is when you teach not the content of process, when you teach the process of science and the critical thinking skills that these standards bring into it, you not only inspire real learning, but you get greater depth. You get greater reach into making our students scientists and engineers, the passion that drives you forward to learn more of the reason those graphs are there. Or, I think of myself when I was in the field looking at geologic maps and not really totally getting what they meant in the classroom on the book, but then going out into the field and really doing that and going, look, there's the stratigraphy, and that's why this is drawn like that and those sorts of things. We need to bring more of that process of science, more of that critical thinking. I think it's great that we also have engineering finally coming into this, because I don't know how many CEOs of companies that I've talked to that are continuously say, we don't have the right skills coming into our fields. We're looking for people that are better critical thinkers, that are better understand the process of science, because we want to innovate. We want to be innovative in the future, and that's what I'm really excited about these ones, because I think they will lead to that.
I'm going to defer a minute to my colleague over there. I'm not going to state about my education, master's degree in education. I'm not going to state about my 12 years of teaching. I'm going to speak as a parent. And as a parent that loves good scientific evidence and proof. So I'd like to say that we all love scientific evidence. We would like proof that there's deficits in Utah's current standards. We would like proof that the next generation science standards are superior, that they've been test driven, that there's been data that shows that these are superior standards. We'd like proof that Utah wrote these standards. We'd like proof that students, having used these standards, will think more deeply and will be college and career ready. We'd like proof that this will not remove families from the education as we see our educational goals to special interest groups. We'd like proof that USOE is not performing the dog and pony show here by allowing us to make public comment. We would like proof that USOE did not hide the framework and the agenda behind these standards. We'd like proof that everyone doing the same national standards will somehow create people that excel and succeed at everything rather than creativity and ingenuity. And the cold hard facts is there is no proof.
Thank you for giving me your 1 minute. Thank you. All right. This is a beautiful example of how science ought to be. Both sides are given equal to. And we thank you for that. This is something that's going away with the National Generation Science Standards. I'm a big fan of freedom. There are two kinds of freedom that I'm a big fan of: intellectual freedom and governance freedom. This morning I went online and I looked who created the Next Generation Science Standards. There's a whole list of people: Achieve Incorporated, tons of groups. None of them are my elected representatives. None of them are me. So when we allow ourselves to go to these national standards, there's no amendment process. We lose our voice. We lose our voice. Are we willing? Are we so believing that these standards are so fantastic that we're willing to give up our control to ever amend them, these copyrighted standards, in the future again? These are unelected groups. We have no voice. We can write them letters. They have no obligation to listen to us. So it's very important that the academic freedom and the freedom of governance are both affected by this. On one level, this is about science, but on a more important level, this is about freedom. And academic freedom has to continue. This is a good example, what we're seeing here, of people disagreeing but listening to one another, goes away when you give all control. You give the car keys over to the Next Generation Science Standards, which are copyrighted and which have no amendment process. I want you to really think about that. Think about that as you're driving home tonight. No matter what you think about these science standards, do you want to give away your right to have a conversation like this in the future? Because I guarantee NGSS will not be inviting us to their meetings.
I am a product of public education. I went to Dilworth Elementary School, Hillside Junior High School, Highland High School, Stanford University, Oxford University, and Harvard. And I have to say, you're not with reality in terms of being a Luddite in the 21st century. You need to think about what is going to be beneficial in the 21st century. I'm a professor of biology at the University of Utah. My students, under the present curriculum, do not understand hypothesis-driven science. What you're advocating is going to continue that perpetuation of ignorance into the future. The common standards are the ones that need to be done. Sorry.
So you do remember what I said about that. So I want to close tonight by just really thanking everybody for coming out. The thoughts about participating in this process are really important. I also want to remind you that your Board of Education is elected, and they are the ones that will make the decision about the Utah Science Standards. We continue to collect input. You may email Ricky. He's written his email over here. He'll hold that up for you, but it's easy to find on the state office website. Also, we do have our survey that's up, and there, I guess you can take it twice if you don't have enough characters, but for sure, like I said, email also works. And so we are about halfway through the public comment period, although this is the last public comment open meeting like this, but we are continuing to collect the information. I think we have over 800.
Close to 900.
We have close to 900 responses already to the survey, and we're absolutely thrilled with that. So again, I thank you all for coming tonight. This does conclude the meeting, but as I said earlier, we will hang around to listen to you. I encourage you to contact us through email, telephone, contact your board members, let them know what you think, and thanks so much for coming tonight.
Now we can clap.
If anybody wants a copy of the side-by-side comparison.
Let me figure out the control software.
That'd be great.
I just wanted to add, I was a great proponent of Prosperity 2020. And for those of you that are in the audience tonight that know 2020, it was sponsored by the governor and a lot of our private businesses. And I'm one of those that was a great proponent, hoping to get STEM more reinforced in our public schools. I was a big proponent until I saw the math curriculum that came home with my students, and I saw a math book. And I did a nice research for 3 years, and it does not build upon the skills that the kids need in order to become career ready or in our field that we need in Utah for STEM jobs. As I looked at the standards for the science, and there are many of you here on both sides that have read through them carefully, I'm afraid the same thing is going to happen with our science standards as the math standards. And that will be that our state board members, that our state board school members will ignore the complaints and the concerns that those of us in the private sector that are paying for our schools will be ignored. We want perfection, we want excellence in our science standards, we need it in our businesses. We don't need kids coming into our businesses with philosophies and theories and social agendas. We need exactness and truth and facts, and we need to be able to teach them how to find those. Thank you.
Absolutely, go ahead.
I am from Davis County School
district, and my daughter was in 9th grade when the math standards were adopted. And I come from a school district where 5 math teachers developed a math program where they were passing 27% of each, very large by the way, graduating class from the AP calculus test. They would pass the AP calculus test. 27% of each graduating class was passing calculus. When the state adopted the Common Core Math Standards, that locally directed, locally controlled program was completely destroyed, and we lost the teachers who developed it. My daughter is now in a pre-calculus class with 1 other junior in her class. She transferred last semester from a pre-calculus class with 1 other junior. Calculus is now going to be taught on an A day and the math labs on a B day. The classes have been decimated, and yet the State Board of Education is willing to repeat this mistake. If we are going to adopt standards, they should be local. They should be there should be time for them to be vetted by local people, and we should start with students in kindergarten.
Well, for the few of you who are still here, willing to listen to some other words, I appreciate it. As was mentioned earlier, I was one of the parents on the Parent Review Committee, and I have some very deep concerns about this program. Conceptually, yes, Utah could in the future, even if they adopt the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, go a different direction. But can anyone imagine that they would really do that? I think it's just one of those pie-in-the-sky type statements. The next thing I'd like to mention is this is what they handed you tonight, these 6 pages right here. This is what the Parent Review Committee got. There's a lot of materials, supporting materials that you guys didn't see, and it's important for understanding the foundation of these standards. In fact, in the Provo discussion, there was one teacher who got up and he actually spoke in favor of the standards. But he says, you know, I go down here and I see this thing, and I spent 15 minutes trying to look at this standard and figure out what it meant, and I have no idea. It is completely foreign to me. Obviously, that's not all that's going to be handed, and you really need to have a chance to see the whole thing. Further, on these standards, as I mentioned in the little concept thing as we wrote them up here, there is no falsification concept that is in these standards, and that is true with not just the 6th, 7th, and 8th, but I specifically went and spent extra time today looking for that philosophy of science issue of falsification. I appreciate the gentleman who, from the planetarium, got up and said that's a foundational piece of science, and it is, but it is not in the next generation science standards, which they're trying to get us to adopt. Other people have said that, look at this integration with math in the science standards. Well, there is some aspects of that, but then in certain other aspects, such in the upper levels of chemistry, they assiduously dodge the math that could be used to help build the understanding of these students. And this is a real problem here. They make a pretense, but it doesn't follow through. It's really missing. Further, there's a big push on these social issues where we're teaching science. It should be science class rather than promoting the global warming agenda and so forth. And many of these engineering standards, which I appreciate some concept of the engineering coming in, many of these engineering standards are based on this idea that, or I should say, are focusing on this global warming agenda as well. Another thing that was brought out in the Provo meeting is that there are a number of students who come to college who cannot understand or do not effectively question, do not effectively process material. And these science standards, and the professor who brought this up, thought, oh, this is just the greatest thing for doing that. No, these science standards do not encourage the questioning of these theories with the students. In fact, I can turn to a number of places where the students are fed the end result, such as I'll turn to grade 7 here, and on grades, or on 7.2.2, it talks about the thing, and then it says, to identify relationships not evident in the fully formed anatomy. That's their conclusion. They don't look at the possibility or the evidence that could contradict it. Same thing in 7.2.4, apply scientific ideas, so forth, to infer evolutionary relationships. It doesn't say, let's look at it objectively. It takes the conclusion. So I am certainly against these standards as they are. I really think we need to just dump them and start over with a clean sheet, or take our current science standards, which really are not too challenging to our schools, because if you look at students who are taking similar rates of the ACT with other states, we are turning up #1 scores on the ACT. So I think that we have some other opportunities to look at rather than going into these unproven and challenged next generation science standards. Thank you.
My name is Kristen. I'm a parent, and for that, I have a specific.
Okay, my name is Jessica Egan, I'm a parent, and for that. So, if you go onto the USOE's website, it has a picture of this cute girl in a lab coat, microscope, she's smiling, it looks great. And it says promises to keep about that. And I think that's great. We should definitely keep our promises. The problem is USOE is not keeping promises. Their website, as of 3 o'clock this afternoon, still links to another website saying if you want more information about Utah's report, go here. It says there is no movement or desire or intention on the part of the state boards to adopt more standards common to other states in the national name besides English and math. And so I want to know why we are even, meeting here tonight. It should not even be an issue in terms of national science standards. So what's the problem with national science standards? We can't, as someone else said earlier today, we can't meet and talk about this. I can't go over to wherever Achieve's headquarters are and tell them how I feel about this, and they'll say, oh yes, we'll try to do that for you. I'm not paying them, they don't answer to me. And it's that way when we've had national science standards. I'm a chemist, my husband is a software engineer. We want our kids to be good at science. But going through national science standards is not the way to do it. People cite all these experts that have done this, and that's great, they're experts in the field, I respect that. But experts can be wrong. I've worked doing research for university when I was in graduate school there. And, I can tell you that people that...
Yeah, or we could do it somewhere. It doesn't necessarily have to be up there. Because they're kind of anxious.
We can change that. We can have these meetings. If it's at a national level, we can't. We're stuck. And we will not be able to help our children. Even if you're not Mormon, you can still appreciate what the Mormon pioneers did at settling here. They managed to do it without federal funds, without federal anything. And if they can do that, we can surely continue that heritage that we have and make up our own standards, so we're trying to do that.
I know there's so many more of you that still want to talk, but Principal Madden has informed me that his custodian needs to close the school. As you know, schools are not typically open at night. And so, again, let me just reiterate that we really do want the feedback from you. And so please use our other avenues in order to let us know what you think. But we do need to leave the school so Principal Madden can let his staff go home. And thank you once again all for coming.
They won't listen to me.
Yeah, is this, just for your own use, or is this for?
I know this whole
Whole
group
group.
here that's just dying of those standards.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it would be just among us. But
Okay.
Yeah.
So, that's fine.
Yeah, and I don't know, should we go out there, or
Yeah,
I
we
don't
can
know
go
if they're
outside
gonna
and
kick us out,
do
or?
it, so that they can try to.
These guys have homework. I'm gonna have to look at my
Well, just the things on the left. Well, there's evidence. If there's evidence behind it and there's not evidence behind it, too.
My server tried to recognize it.
It's pretty simple.
Thank you, boys, for your time.
Thanks, guys.
In answer to
Thank
your
you so
earlier
much.
question, the reason they don't have standards for the K-5 is because the national standards are being written That's the answer. When they write them, they'll make them. But until then, they're waiting for the...
touch it.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, the biggest problem on this is just the whole idea of a national standard groupthink being imposed upon the states. Because when you empower a small group to impose their values unaccountable to anyone, they're not voted on, they're not elected. We have no way to reverse anything that is blatantly wrong. And when you turn it over like this is, it is a cut and paste job. And that paper I handed out was amazing. I mean, just copy the Utah standard, put it in Google, and the national standard shows up verbatim. So, those who are trying to pull this off as local are lying. They're either lying out of ignorance or lying out of deception. There's only two options here, but it's a patent lie. So, and the science is not good. In order to make room for a lot of the politically driven dribble in there, they've had to bump out a lot of good science. There's amazing stuff going on right now in microbiology. There's stuff going on in genetics that they won't touch with a 10-foot pole because it interferes with the conclusions that they have given our kids. And that just blows my mind. You go through a standard after standard, you read them close, and they have a good, fun-looking activity up front. And then they say, okay, come up with all this evidence in order to support this conclusion. That's not science. They're giving them the conclusion and sending the kids out to find the evidence. In science, you look at the evidence, and then you form your conclusion. But that is extremely threatening to those who have an agenda. And the flip side of this is, they not only give them the conclusions, they word it and enforce it that the other evidence cannot be presented under threat of their career, a lot of different things. There's a national group called the National Association of Science Teachers that enforce these standards. And if any local teacher even gives supplemental reading in some of this cutting edge science, they can be fired, they can be transferred, they can be censured. Yeah, it's huge. I mean, this is not just a little local issue. We're touching the edge of an iceberg here. And that's one reason why I say the state board really has no control. In the long run, there's small fish swimming in an ocean. And you know, even if they vote it down, they'll come back and implement it another way. You look at a lot of legislation up here. This stuff is already being woven into testing, woven into curriculum, woven into the physical facilities. I mean, it's amazing when I looked at the legislative agenda. This is a juggernaut. And the only thing that I can see is either the governor vetoes it, because it definitely breaks his promise. He promised this would not happen, and it has. And, you know, he's hanging out there politically on it. And the other is for the state school board to add to it the ability for the teachers to be able to add additional material looking at both sides of some of these issues, especially the politically driven ones, because we should not be indoctrinating our kids on a national level. So, you know, both scientifically, philosophically, and as a parent, I'm horrified by what this is, you know, coming down the pike. And the other side is so brainwashed on it. Then one guy got up there, oh, anybody that's opposing this is wanting to take us back into flat Earth. Oh, come on, you know, it's the adults here. That's so condescending. It's not even funny. You know, he disgraces himself by bringing that up. But that's the circles that these people that write the curriculum run in. That's their thinking. Anybody that challenges them is a knuckle-dragging yammer. You know? And, I'm sorry. You know, I don't subscribe to it. I know scientists are fallible. I know they have complete feats of clan. I know they have agendas. I'm not willing to turn my kids over to them.
Good for you.
Okay.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
It's all bad, so, you know.